Hi, everyone, and welcome to our session. My name is Jessica Loretti, and I'm the Managing Director of the Anthem Awards. It's my absolute pleasure today to sit down in Fireside Chat with Monica Lewinsky, producer, activist, and Vanity Fair contributing editor, along with Greg Hahn, co-founder and Chief Creative Officer of Mischief. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thanks.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And first wanted to just say, congratulations. You won 2 Anthem Awards for your work on the epidemic campaign to stop cyberbullying in the responsibility cause. So congratulations on being inaugural winner. And we're going to be talking about that work here today.
Thank you.
So, Monica, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your journey to becoming an activist in this space. I mean, everyone is obviously so familiar with your story, and you've taken something deeply personal, something, deeply traumatic experience from your life and turned that energy into becoming an outspoken advocate on cyberbullying. Can you talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about standing up on this issue? And if you had a moment where you knew you really had to act on what you call this culture of humiliation.
Mm-hmm. I think, many of us have had various kinds of traumatic experiences in our lives. And I think anytime we can take those experiences, and mine, as you said, from 20 years ago of becoming a poster child for public shaming and bullying in a way that is both similar and different to what we have today. But I think anytime we can take those experiences and find a way to extrapolate from them what we went through, what we learned to try to help other people, it's great. But also having on the sort of other side of that loop is having gone through something, I think helps you bring a kind of empathy and an understanding and a level of concern to a problem that that's different than from what we feel. I think you think about when you look at the refugee crisis, right? Someone who's been a refugee is going to have a different level of empathy than someone who hasn't. Doesn't mean you won't still have empathy if you haven't. But for me, I think it was in this long period from kind of scandal as I was trying to rebuild my life, that trying to find a way forward. And there was an incident in 2010 with a young college freshman, Tyler Clementi, who people might remember was secretly webcammed while being intimate with another man. And this unfolded online, and there was shame and humiliation, and he very sadly took his own life. And it was experiencing, I think, the large coverage of that story. We now had social media and watching my mom's reaction, like this trifecta of things, which opened my eyes to this idea that, okay, the landscape had really shifted from 1998 to where we were then. And we continue to see that landscape being, unfortunately, too fertile with this issue. So that's really sort of, that was the kind of the beginning sprouting of my social activism, and then from writing and TED Talk and then getting to work, with creatives on some anti-bullying campaigns, just trying to bring awareness, trying to help make a difference, hoping a parent or a child would see something and just, or a teacher, a bystander, anybody, just to try to shift this culture of humiliation, that we've grown, we've done this, plenty of people to blame large scale, but we do this, so.
Right. Yeah, certainly. I mean, technology obviously has a role to play, but also is a mirror of our society. So we're a big part of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the statistics around cyberbullying. They're really pretty staggering. 59% of teenagers report being a victim of cyberbullying, and the CDC estimates that it's the root cause of 20% of teen suicides. Additionally, only 1 in 10 instances of cyberbullying is reported. So this often goes unnoticed until it's too late. Talk about why you call this an epidemic.
I think that really pandemic is actually even an accurate word. I mean, we called the campaign the epidemic, for the red herring. Really, I don't know if people who are watching this now, have they been able to see any part of the campaign video?
Yeah, yeah. There's links to the campaign on our website, and also it's being shared in the chat now. So if folks haven't seen it, they'll
Okay,
have
I
a
just didn't know. I didn't know if people. I don't want to, but I think the statistics are staggering, and something that's important whenever we're talking about suicide is to always remind everybody that suicide is preventable.
Mm.
And so I think that's kind of an important thing. But at the time that we made this in 2019, one of the statistics too was that 70% of students had seen bullying and cyberbullying in their schools. And
Mm.
so you can understand sort of, when with the campaign, that it was both not only the signs that people could see in schools, but also a sign for parents of seeing what could be happening to their children, to the young people. So.
Mhm. Greg, tell us a little bit about the development of the campaign. Can you share, kind of how you came up with the concept for the interactive film and sort of how it worked with the adjoining text message campaign?
Sure, sure. Yeah, it was a lot of people, the team back at BBDO at the time in 2019. I mean, first and foremost, we wanted to create understanding, right?
Mm.
And the best way to create understanding is to sort of break this glass wall that is between someone on the receiving and participating end of a text message, because it's so dehumanizing. It's so removed from the actual feelings when you text something. So we really wanted to bring to life that feeling of what happens when you are on the receiving end, and to be careful of what that effect can be when you're sending somebody a text message. So there was that level of it. And then there was also just being able to recognize when it's happening to somebody. So there's all these elements to play in place. And we thought that doing like an interactive film was like a really effective way of getting people to understand both what it feels like to get one and what it feels like to send one. And then viewing the film without the text messages and then viewing it the next time with the text messages was a good illustration of the effects that these messages can have on people. And it's not always noticeable until you know what to look for. So that was so the technology, we used it in three ways that couldn't have been done without it, which was to create this empathy and this understanding and this recognition.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you're watching it the first time without the text messaging, you're like not really sure what's happening. And, at first you think maybe she has COVID, and maybe then at some point you're like, oh, maybe she has an eating disorder, or, maybe she's struggling with depression or some other issues. And then it's sort of revealed afterwards through the text messaging campaign what's really going on. So I thought it was very effective use of that technology and the creative together. I think it worked really well to tell that story.
Yeah, I always strive for ideas that, like, if you're going to use technology, use it in a way that the story or the idea couldn't have been expressed without it. So that's really built into the process. And along with Monica and all these insights she came to us, it's like this felt like the best way to get someone to not passively engage with this story.
Yeah, speaking of that, can you talk a little bit about what is some of the research and background you needed to do before putting this project together?
From a technology standpoint, or
just on the issue area as well?
Monica came to us, I'll let her speak to us about the statistics that were just growing, as she mentioned, exponentially every day through online is, it's a breeding ground for bullying.
I think we had too that this was our third campaign that we had all done together, and as Greg was saying, it was a big team of people, some of whom at Mischief and BBDO, and so just really, I think everybody having a passion to try to do something different. And in terms of I think the creative process, it was about, as Greg was saying, really trying to get people to understand, if you haven't gone through this, what does it feel like? right? Because empathy is going to engender the most compassion, and compassion is, I think, one of the engines for trying to change the issues. But we, in terms of the research too, I think one of the things that was really interesting was coming to understand there was a point, like just on this intersection, which might be interesting for people to think about, is the intersection of creativity, social issues, and these campaigns. Like, we needed to I don't know if re-edit's the right word, but in our creative process, we needed to make sure the ending, it became very clear that she had survived. And so because statistically, we had been told from Crisis Text Line and from the research we had done about how important it is to show sort of an unsuccessful suicide, right? So an unsuccessful attempt. That's so I think that was a really interesting and eye-opening space for me. We hadn't had that with our other campaigns. So I think trying to look at, really what are best practices when you're talking about mental health issues too. And small funny sidebar of this, that I'm now calling her Emma, but Emma Malouf, who's the actress who was in the PSA. She ended up playing Sarah Paulson's daughter as Linda Tripp. So she was Linda Tripp's daughter in Impeachment.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's an incredible actor. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
One thing that in developing this, Monica reminded me of something, is like how we were all very involved with the process and behind the scenes and how the technology worked, but still, the first time we watched it with the text messages coming through at the same time, it was still extremely jarring to receive those on your phone. And so there was a great deal of responsibility. We had to make sure that when people did get these messages, that they understood that this was part of the campaign and this was not some stranger texting them. So there was there's some disclaimers at the bottom of each text, far down, so it didn't interrupt with the power
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, shockingly, I think shockingly too, as we've done really with all the campaigns, but this one in particular, like, these text messages were real things that had been said to people. I mean, we had an EMT on set who shared a horrific story about someone she knew who kids in the class were like, just go kill yourself, over text message. And so some of these things, they came from real life instances. And yet at the same time, that was just sort of I think a heavy moment for all of us, Greg, right? Of just realizing, the things that are actually being said are too hard and too heavy.
Right.
Sending out to people. Like, there's just there's a real miss there, a misfire in how it all works. So I'm not sure if that just made sense, but hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's really, all this sort of coming back to this. It was like 2 years ago when we did this, but it's so powerful, the fact that the messages that are happening in real life were too heavy to put into this film. You can only imagine what goes on,
Yeah, I think too, one of the other things that, sorry, Jessica, we could go back to your questions. I don't mean to hide that. Just, I think one of the things that also struck me that kind of as we were talking before about both the, there being sort of students and young people who are going through this, watching and seeing themselves in this. They're the parents watching this, or teachers coming to understand what young people are going through. But the third thing that we saw, which is a really important message around this too, is that we saw that the actor in the PSA not reaching out for help and suffering in silence. And I think that is, I know from my own experiences, and I'm sure many people watching this too, you guys included, who've gone through difficult times of varying levels, that it's when you keep everything inside that it's like the shame blows up. The idea that you're the only one who's gone through this, that then also feeds the shame, the fear, the sadness. And there is something to popping that balloon of silence around this kind of stuff. And that is always the most important messaging with this.
Yeah, and it's so isolating too when you're in that space and not sharing that with anyone, and don't necessarily, if you don't feel like you have anyone you can talk to or go to with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Monica's been really great about this messaging at the end of where to go next. So you're not just leaving people with like, here's the problem, here's signs to look for. There are some definite steps that people can take if they're experiencing this, and this has always been part of all the campaigns that we've done with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You released this PSA during National Bullying Prevention Month and with several nonprofit partners. Sandy Hook Promise, Sit With Us, Think Before You Type, the Tyler Clementi Foundation, and many others. Can you talk a little bit about the work of these organizations and why it's so important to partner with these kind of nonprofit organizations with this expertise in a project like this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, one of the things that can be really challenging in the nonprofit sector is that you can have a number of different organizations all working towards the same issue. And while people are kind and wonderful and doing good services, there's also this underlying point where people are fighting for the same dollars, sadly. And so I think we don't get to see often enough, we don't get to bring people together and to really learn from all of the different ways that their organization might be dealing with the same issue. Mm. So I think that that's always been a great resource for us, whether it's Childhood Resilience Foundation, the Diana Award, the Tyler Clementi Foundation. All of these organizations are dealing with this issue in slightly different ways. Right. So whether it's from addressing bystanders or bringing, anti-bullying ambassadors into a school, like training kids to be a peer-related anti-bullying ambassador. I mean, all of these things. Natalie, I'm blanking on her last name, who created Sit With Us. It's an app so that nobody has to sit alone at school. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had that happen. It was awful, So, but I've had it happen as an adult. It's not awful. So I think that with all those organizations, not only the input they gave us, but also there's, I think it's one of the benefits of strong creative, working with incredible creative people, and having, I'm lucky to have a platform like on social media where people are, I think my brother would say weirdly interested, but, because I'm but I think to have these bigger platforms and to have an opportunity to also, I think that's something, for people to be thinking about is how can you share your microphone, or, as Gloria Steinem says, like, how can you bring someone along, And so I think that's always felt important. Twitter's been really fantastic about, I forget what they call them, but it's like nonprofit dollars for promotion.
Where you can donate.
Yes. So I think it's really about trying to, it's really trying to help as many of the different spokes that we can in this problem.
Yeah, and I think so much is about that partnership, right? Bringing together the folks who are working on the ground in nonprofit space, amazing creatives and technologists, a platform where we can really amplify this message. Those are kind of all of the pieces that a campaign really needs to.
And we've been really lucky. Yeah, we've been really lucky too, Jessica, in having had great media partners with, I think over the years, all three of the major networks have, we've launched the campaigns on those, and I've certainly been grateful for that, Yeah,
absolutely. It's a big part of the distribution, and getting people to see this stuff is one part of all of these different things that have to come together to do a campaign.
Yeah. Like this. And then I think what becomes really, I don't know, Greg, for you, if it's the same, for me, I think probably what becomes the most meaningful with these two is hearing from teachers, like teachers who are they've used these campaigns in their classrooms, and so, so there's just that element of, I think for me, it makes me feel like the work is making a difference and it's doing something.
Yeah, anecdotally, we had one of the creatives on this campaign. His sister was a teacher and didn't even know they were related to the work, but they were sharing it with their students. So that's really important. And as a father of like an 11-year-old, I see this, and, I'm part of the parents that are looking for the science right now, and it's a frightening place to be. So anything that would help the situation is warranted.
Yeah, absolutely. In your TED Talk, you talk about how technology can really amplify the harm of bullying and the impact behind that anonymity. Can you talk about how this affects marginalized groups like women, people of color, and also the LGBTQ+ community?
Yeah. I think we see that with technology, it can be both a curse and a blessing. So, I mean, I always think it's important. It's very easy for us to all get on the train of how bad technology is and how it's being wielded. But I just also want to flashpoint that there can be good things that come from technology. But in particular, I think that women, people of color, and the LGBTQ community suffer far worse from the leeway that people have on social media. And that it's in part because, I mean, I worked too, I executive produced a documentary called 15 Minutes of Shame that came out last fall. And we really look at this as well in terms of understanding the process, how they're building, that the things that we are seeing have happened to more marginalized communities. I think in particular, Dr. Safia Noble talks about, that women of color in particular have had this for the worst for the longest. And I think we see what's happening with the marginalized groups. They're sort of the ghosts of what are to come, which is why it's important. So not only to help these groups and to help shift things, because obviously there's no reason anybody should be experiencing that. But so in trying to focus on that, but I also think if we want to know where we're going, that this is where we're headed, and it's not okay.
Right. What do you think is the role and responsibility of these social media platforms and tech companies in all of this?
I think that they need to put people over profit a bit more. I think that, I understand with innovation and technology, I think we can all understand that you can't safeguard for everything that could go wrong when you're coming up with something new, when you're breaking new ground. But I think there is a point at this point now, I would love to see a new social media company that is baking empathy into its design, baking these kinds of issues into how do we nudge and cue people towards de-escalating instead of escalating? There's right. Greg, did you want to?
Yeah, I think people over profits is a very good way to put it, because where they make their money is on engagement, and what gets engagement is anger and fear and
humiliation.
Right, and humiliation, and it's the spectator sport of it. So, they've built their model on hate as a performance art, where people are tuning in to watch the battle. And that's all due to the algorithm. And I think there are things they can do to better calm those waters and not generate more of what is the evil bad part of social media.
Yeah. Being on the receiving end of a tsunami of social media hate can be a life-altering experience for people. We use cancel culture to talk about so many different things, but there is a swath of people who are I prefer accountability. Roxane Gay says consequence culture, and Swisher says accountability culture, and I think that we need to hold all of those together. But when this happens to people who are not public people, the effects are devastating. Devastating.
Yeah. I urge anyone to watch the documentary, the 15 Minutes of Shame. Yeah.
Thanks,
yeah.
Greg.
It honestly affected, because you do think that these people who are massively shamed, but they're almost like celebrities in the fact that they're not real people to
Right.
you when you're participating in that, and you realize that for every person you're calling out, that's a human, and they're feeling that, and you can't disassociate that. And you see in this documentary, you see the consequences of the other side of what happens when someone is judged that way without any facts or any thoughts of repercussion from the people that are doing it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we've all been on the freeway. We've all seen a car accident on the freeway. We've all slowed down to rubberneck, but how many of us thinks 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days later, oh, is that person okay? So we all participated, but it just, and it is. And of course, the online disinhibition effect, like psychologically leaves people in a place where, I think, as you were saying in the beginning, Jessica, too, the anonymity of the screen, the fact that you're also not, not in person. I think you can't read someone's reaction. You can't feel the energy of their emotion that, we've all done that, right? Like we make a joke to someone and we're like, oh, oops, that cut too deep. That was too soon, but you don't have that online. And so I think context is really lost. And it's one thing for understanding information. It's another when you're talking about a human life, and a real person.
Absolutely. Want to be mindful of your time, but do you want to tell us what's next for your work in this space? Do you have any new projects on cyberbullying to share with us?
It's the last 2 years were a pause, I think, with the pandemic and pandemic. And so I think, this year it's trying to, not yet. Maybe, but not yet. How's that? Rather than me trying to press it up. Maybe not yet. So,
yeah.
But thank you so much for this, and thank you, to the Anthem Awards for recognizing our work, and it's these kinds of things, really emotional and thoughtful and impactful storytelling can save someone's life, so this stuff is meaningful. It's really meaningful. I'm grateful to have worked with everybody on these, and we got to do them. And now I'll shut up.
and I don't think I could have said any better than Monica just said. So thank you for having us. This has been a great talk.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for joining us. Thank you for the work that you do. It's really so important. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.